and it's failed to do so, and will continuously fail to do so because, in order to have influence on a nation economically, there needs to be economic interaction. Now, the United States and Iran have zero direct economic interaction. Over the decades, though, there's been indirect, meaning that the United States could put pressure on nations that did have economic interaction. This is one of the reasons why the JCPOA ultimately failed, because Iran did have considerable economic interaction with Europe and desired to keep it that way and expand it. But again, because Trump withdrew, threatened secondary sanctions, and Europe balked, that went away. So today there's virtually zero economic interaction between Iran and Europe. Iran has made the pivot to the east that they've been talking about for decades now, but the moderate element of the Iranian domestic political dynamic had always resisted it because there were historical ties between Iran and the West. This is not going to get restored. Iran is now plugged into the East. BRICS is becoming something that Iran wasn't just. Remember, Iran's president, the one who died in the airplane, whose name I'm going to forget right now, Raisi, I think, he was all about BRICS. He and his foreign minister, they died. The new president came in and he hesitated, and so when Russia had the big gathering in Kazan in October of 2024, I believe, Iran wasn't all on board. Iran hesitated with the strategic framework agreement with Russia. Iran also hesitated with China. There's no hesitation today. They're all in. China just sent the message out. We will not tolerate any secondary sanctions for our doing business with Iran. And Russia, of course, couldn't care less about anything the United States does anyways. So no, this has a snowball's chance in hell. And let me make the following prediction. In less than a week, Trump will reverse course because it'll become painfully obvious that there's zero economic leverage. This was a panic tweet sent out by Trump, and it's all posted by.
If you have a child, you can threaten your kid. Hey, I'm going to cut off your allowance. Get out there and mow the grass. You're not getting your allowance. Okay, you can sanction them, but you can't go out to your neighbor's kid and go, "Hey, if you don't cut my grass, I'm going to cut off your allowance." Kid's going to go, "Yeah, just wave at you." Or maybe, gesture with some part of his hand or fingers at you. The United States has lost leverage over Iran. If you go back to 2015 when the JCPOA was in effect, at that point, both China and Russia agreed with the West to impose sanctions on Iran. Iran didn't have an out. Now, today, you've got the north-south corridor with Russia. You've got an east-west corridor, the new Silk Road, old Silk Road with China. And you've got these 6 land routes with Pakistan that were opened, if you recall, in April when Trump first announced some sanctions against Iran, that the blockade, actually, when he announced the blockade, the Pakistanis came out 2 days later and said, hey, we're opening these 6 land routes to trade with Iran. Now, right now, if they go forward with this economic D-Day and try to punish countries, the only one they've really got potential leverage over is Pakistan. But Pakistan, the problem with the U.S. bullying like this and threats is that it forces countries then ultimately to say, do we want to stick with the United States or do we want to go with China?
Right.
And the reality is, with China and Russia and BRICS, the setting up of this alternative financial network has actually made some progress. China's cross-border interbank payment system, CIPS, is now I've seen 2 different numbers, over 100 countries, which I think is more likely. Someone put 185. I don't think it's that high, but 100 countries are now signed up and using it. This is an alternative to SWIFT. So the bottom line is, as Scott was saying, the United States, in its words, its threats, don't make sense because it doesn't have control. And let me just point out one other thing. Trump in his Truth Social post announcing this. I mean, this would be the equivalent of Joseph Stalin, after his troops took Berlin, turning around and saying, okay, Germans, now we're going to hit you with super duper economic sanctions. What doesn't make sense.
It not only skips over the interagency process, which means you have, Scott Bessent compelled to convince the other departments and agencies in the United States government that sanctions will work and that there's this coordination and everybody's on the page. There's no policy. There literally is no policy because you can't have policy that hasn't been staffed. But the other important part about the policy-making process is the diplomatic aspect of it, meaning that you go out to your, especially if you're going to do international sanctions, you go out to your partners and your allies and those who you want to influence, and you engage with them and say, this is why we're doing it, this is what we're doing, what are your concerns, etc. None of that has happened. Pakistan, let's say Pakistan's a target, this is what it may be. Pakistan woke up this morning knowing that they have a Chinese-Pakistan economic corridor that's very important to them. Very important. There's a United States-Pakistan economic corridor. The United States, all they can do is threaten secondary sanctions. The United States is not a major, huge creeper. China and Pakistan just did, a security pact with Saudi Arabia that pretty much guarantees that Saudi Arabia will continue to provide loans to Pakistan to prop us. So we did no homework. We did nothing. There's nobody in the world today that believes the United States won this war.
To believe that, this is, we're just going to collapse it. Notice what happened yesterday in the markets. You should also show the video of Scott Bessent going, I don't know why the price of oil is not falling. I mean, we've announced these sanctions and price of oil is going up. Yeah, tacit evidence, or this is indirect evidence of how the administration's been manipulating the oil market. Because what happened yesterday is China and Japan both, they started offloading treasury bills. And here's Bessent trying to do his best to keep the yield, what the interest they have to pay on those treasury bills from going up. He's trying to get it to go down, but boom, it kept going up, and the price of oil was going up. Gee, why is that? Because there's a shortage. Right now, there is a global crisis. Doesn't admit it, but a global crisis out of the shortage of diesel fuel. And it was touched off by the fact that once the amount of oil coming out of the Persian Gulf ended, and it didn't end on March 2nd when the blockade, or I guess the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz went into full effect. It took about another 30, 40 days for that to impact because there were still tankers on the high seas delivering oil. But the countdown clock started around the 1st of April. And since April until recently, countries were mitigating that threat by drawing down on strategic petroleum reserves. Those now are running out. And now the crunch is here. And the refineries, particularly in the United States, notice we used to get one of our major sources of oil that's used to create the diesel fuel came out of Canada. Well, what's Canada doing now? They told us to hose off. They're selling their oil to China because Trump's been such an ass.
Agriculture, there's no diesel shortage in Russia. You're just not exporting it. Now, that means that there's a diesel shortage globally, so the prices are going to go up. But Bessie would say, well, that means that we're strangling the Russian economy. No, because now all the oil that was supposed to be refined at the diesel is now being exported by Russia. Russia is making windfall profits right now. Yet the goal of hitting Russia's refinery capacity was to strangle Russia's ability to fund the war machine. Russia's making more money. They made 60% more money last July.
Classified as a special military operation. There has been a little bit. There has been some criticism within senior ranks in the military of Putin. They think he was too soft and again, this gets us to this other contradiction that the West is obsessed with getting rid of Putin. They want to get rid of him. They haven't thought through what comes next. But Putin has, he has basically taken the gloves off now, because you're seeing it in this comprehensive, first the shutdown of the Black Sea, both Odessa, Nikolaev, ports up the Danube, they've been closed. Russia is bombing them. Any ship trying to get into those ports, they're taking it out. So they've essentially put an economic stranglehold on Ukraine. It has no options there. Then what they're doing with the nightly attacks on Kyiv, on both military structures, industrial plants, warehouses, it's causing damage that, frankly, Ukraine will never be able to recover from in the foreseeable future. And then on the ground, the movement of the troops, it's not just, we saw like in 2023, people were focused on Bakhmut, the battle for Bakhmut. And then going into 2024, it was the battle in Avdiivka. Then, in 2025, Pokrovsk. Now it's multiple. It's not just one. They are attacking along at least 7 axes of attack, from the north, even up into Chernihiv, into Sumy, in Kharkiv, in Donetsk, in Zaporizhia, in Dnipropetrovsk, and Kherson. So Russia is now on a roll, and if they still call it an SMO, so be it. But it's got all the makings of actually a total war effort now.
The greatest strategic threat to Israel in the world today, greater than Iran. There are people in Israel saying we have to stop Iran because Turkey's the problem. And the reason is that Turkey's actually in Syria, and Syria borders Israel. And this means that, and also the Jolani government is a Turkish-sponsored government. And so Israel's in a state of panic because Erdogan has articulated policies that condemn Israel for what they're doing in Gaza and has called Israel out as a genocidal state. So the potential from the perspective of Israel is that if Turkey actually gets down to the border, there could be problems. And Israel's just not going to beat. Forget NATO. Turkey's not a member of NATO. People need to stop saying that. Yes, they are in name only. Turkey's been running independent foreign policy, independent national security policy in the Middle East and Central Asia. NATO had nothing to say about Turkey's intervention in the Azerbaijani-Armenian conflict. NATO has nothing to say whatsoever about Turkey's involvement in Iraq, Turkey's involvement in Syria. NATO's not involved in this. Turkey has a residual nature. But after 2016, when NATO in the United States backed a coup against Erdogan, the Turkish military has been purged of their pro-NATO element. The Turkish military today is NATO in name only. They don't function as an adjunct of NATO. And NATO, frankly speaking, if we parse out what happened in Ankara, NATO has turned its back on Turkey. They were hoping that Turkey could shoulder the burden of the Ukraine conflict for them. Turkey's not playing that game. The United States is incapable of an agreement. The F-35 stands as proof positive. But the thing that Israel needs to understand is, the Turks like to fight, and they're pretty good at it, and they're not afraid to die. I just bring up the example of the duty officer on July 16, 2016 at the Special Forces who received his phone call from his commanding general saying, my deputy is coming with 40 commandos. They're traitors. They're launching a coup. They're going to land and try and take over the headquarters. You need to kill him when he gets off the helicopter. And the sergeant went, yes, sir. And he said, you know what I'm saying? Yes, sir. You know what this means? Yes, sir. Okay, I'll see you in heaven. And he hung up. The guy took his pistol, loaded it, helicopter landed. He walked out there. It's on videotape. He walked out, went up, shot the general in the head, killed him. He got killed. He lost his life. But Turks, this is what they do. Look at Israel. They lose 6 guys. The nation goes in the morning, snot coming out of their nose as they cry and wail and all that. Turks bury their dead and say, let's keep going. Look at the Turkish brigade in Korea. If the Israelis fought the Turks would overrun Israel in about 3.2 seconds and bayonet that wall. And that's why Israel's nervous. They want to try and nip this thing in the bud.
And one of the interesting, actually, I knew this, but it didn't really dawn upon me. When you go back for the last 25 years, 95% of all the terrorist incidents that have been recorded by the National Counterterrorism Center and put into the annual report on terrorism that my old office at State issues, it's groups, Sunni extremists, Salafists as they're called. Where we're calling about Al Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, etc. And the biggest funders of those groups, the Gulf Arabs and the United States. Now you got to step back and say, why would the United States be funding these Sunni Salafist groups, these radical Islamists? Because who else do they attack? They attack Iran. We've been using these groups as proxies. We did it we funded, we were behind the extremists, these Sunni extremists that attacked Russia and led to a 10-year war in Chechnya. And we've been doing it as well in the Middle East to go after Iran. So we need to disabuse as Americans of this notion that, we're really against terrorism. No, we've been funding it, unfortunately.